episode 12 of our FM COVID-19 series, where today we're going to talk about re-entry into the workplace. We have an awesome panel lined up, and before I turn it over to Peter, who will be moderating today's session, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So we've muted everybody's audio for quality purposes, and also we like to make these as educational and engaging as possible, so please submit your questions in the go-to control panel, because we're going to have a Q&A in the session. So now let me turn it over to Peter Ankerstern, who's moderating today's session. Oh, but before I do, also, you can find everything in our Coronavirus Resource Center. So we're going to have a full recording of this episode and all past episodes. Please go to ifma.org/coronavirus. All right, Peter?
Thank you, Chris, and welcome to this 12th episode of the IFMA COVID-19 webinar series. This is about the re-entry into the workplace, how to enter, manage visitors, and communicate changes. As Chris said, we have an awesome panel with us today. Unfortunately, there's one camera down, so there's one person that you don't get to see. So you can guess who that is from the current setup here. But let me just start by introducing the panel. We have Federico Garcia Parra, who is the head of global strategic accounts as OTIS Elevators Company. And Federico lives in the United Kingdom, but is actually from Spain originally. Before he joined OTIS, where now OTIS is an independent company, Federico was part of United Technologies, where he was also involved with the OTIS brand. And where he worked with, and he has done some fantastic work on the re-entry plans and the whole vertical transportation issues. Next up, we have Amy Mitchell, and Amy is from Des Moines, Iowa, in the United States. And Amy is the AI Application Solution Manager at IBM. Before she joined IBM, she was with Lowe's and then JLL. So it's Amy has been in the company that I'm currently at, which is always nice. And she has been also a solution specialist within IBM, dealing with Tririga and IoT. And then last up, we have Josh Duchamp. And Josh is the managing director of the Procos Group in Belgium, and he lives in Belgium. Still a Belgian that lives in Belgium. That's always nice, easy to keep track of. But Josh has spent many years in the FM industry, and he is the founder of the IFMA Belgium chapter back in 2001, and he is currently a fellow board member of the IFMA Board of Directors, and he's also chair of the European Advisory Board of IFMA. Myself, my name is Peter Ankerstern. I'm global lead of facility management and experience services at JLL. Before that, I worked for a brief period with WeWork, and then I spent an awful lot of time with the ISS Group, where I was the chief marketing officer for the last 11 years, but I spent 24 years with the company. And my role at IFMA, I'm the first vice chair and the incoming chair here by 1st of July. So let's move in. The setup today is that each of our panelists will do a short 5-6 minute presentation on their topic of specialty, and then we'll have a Q&A session in the second half of this webinar. So the topics we're going to cover is building re-entry and logistics with Federico. We'll take that over. Amy will talk about managing risks and returning with confidence, and then Josh will be talking about optimizing the physical work environment and closing the loop within bringing people back to the office. So with that background, Federico, if you will start the presentation from you and OTIS.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Peter. Excited to be in this panel and hopefully contributing and supporting companies to go back to normality in the re-entry phase. And last time we had a panel, you and I together in Phoenix, we had a face-to-face panel, physical. So hopefully we can help, the organizations and the world to come back to that normality and have our future meeting in workplace face-to-face. So with that said, let's, I'd like to, with the first slide, when navigating through the re-entry phase, it is important to understand how actually the virus has changed the way we use elevators and escalators, and how we actually responding to those changes from a vertical transportation, but also from a logistic perspective. So in our case at OTIS, given our global footprint, we have used learnings from across the world to collaborate with facility managers and help them navigate through this transition. We understand that facility managers now are focusing mainly in two main aspects, which is cleanliness and elevators, because both are critical for that entry phase, right? And to that, FMs, to that end, both elevators and, as I said, hygiene are critical to the conversations as FMs, their tenants and the public consider ways to move people through buildings and cities in a safe way. So if we move to the next slide, Chris, in working with FMs on a global scale, we've seen many interesting ideas developed that experts have recommended with most the transition. And these ideas include solutions like stagger passenger arrival and departure times, or temperature checkpoints, occupancy limits, social distancing via floor markers and passenger communications, and lastly, ideas like sanitizer stations, right? We can move to the next slide, Grace, please. So, regardless of the approach that FMs around the globe are writing operation manuals to help tenants and passengers more safely throughout buildings, whether office buildings or apartment complex or retail centers, the support and collaboration with a vertical transportation company here is critical. And in terms of technology, if we move to the next slide, despite the unprecedented times and steep learning curve of details, we continue to innovate solutions for FMs on their tenants, and as this work went on, it became clear that there are several main categories in which FMs wanted and need support from a vertical transportation perspective. That said, we identified 5 general or main categories, which are purification products or touchless solutions, passenger communications, which includes also the promotion of social distancing, and lastly, the remote monitoring services. The solutions seem simple, as in our case, we already had offerings that fit each category, but the plus side that many of these offerings could be retrofitted. So when looking at touchless elevator technologies, we feature an app, for example, which allows passengers to call elevators directly from their smartphone. And beyond that app, also current technology enables what we call special system operations, which allow elevators to be programmed to continuously stop at selected floors. This helps reduce what now is a lot of fear, which is passenger touch points. So its IoT platform uses elevator data collected via the cloud to offer predictive maintenance services that enhance equipment uptime and also reduce in-person visits from field professional, and as a consequence reduces the amount of necessary building visitors. So in addition to these touchless technologies, we also offer elevator and escalator purification products and services for facility managers. And an example of this, it could be elevator purification fans or escalator antimicrobial handrails, and lastly, escalator handrail sanitizers. Finally, the dispatching system can also help limit the number of passengers assigned to each elevator, helping to improve social distancing. Here, from that perspective, consideration should be given to the overall performance of the elevators as waiting times may increase. In this area, we can help by performing a traffic analysis study to get a better understanding of the impact of the building. And just to end, today there are many different paths that FMs, tenants, and riding public can pursue. but yet there's not a single or universal solution to, that's applicable at all cases. So despite this time of uncertainty, one thing should remain clear is that FMs, tenants, and companies must all come together to emphasize passenger safety. I think this is very, very important, and we should highlight this. And safety should remain the top priority, and it is certainly for us at OTIS. So, thank you.
Thank you, Federico. And while we are getting questions in from the audience, just the one follow-up question from you. OTIS is a big global elevator company from around the world. So, what is your experience? I mean, since the pandemic has bringing people back to the office at different stages around the world, especially from the East, where they have been back to the office for a while now. Europe seems to be getting back now, and now next up, hopefully, North America and Latin America will sort of be next to bring people back to the office. What have you, in your experience, what have been some of the biggest issues around getting people safely into the work and getting them safely to where they want to be in the building? What are some of the main obstacles that you have seen, or the biggest issues that the companies have to deal with?
I think main thing is the building, how you build trust, right? For people, because people have fear, right, in going back to premises, and what actions are being put in place in order to guarantee and ensure the health and the well-being of the people using the facilities in the buildings. So I think here communication is key, and working together, developing guidelines and manuals, that Peter, you and I, for example, have worked on recently, right? In order to communicate clearly what products and services have been put in place to guarantee that safety and that well-being, and also use some of the technologies like we have, for example, that we was talking about before, the communications. Like we have some screens and what we call e-display, we could install in the elevators, that you can communicate with the passengers of the equipment, right, of the units, and inform not only what has been done and what's been put in place to guarantee the safety and the health, but also follow the guidelines and the strategy that the actual building managers are following, and communicate that strategy to the users.
All right, thanks. I just have a couple of questions from the audience, and I'll just take one with you while we have this topic already, Federico. And that's from Gary Hutchins. Do elevator controls needs to be changed or upgraded to use the app technology? Well, you have the what we call the equal. In our case, you have the equal. And the equal for the dispatch, you have to put the dispatching system with each equal for Compass Plus in our case, right? But we're already working on that, and we've already launched it in some of the markets. So the technology is now available in some of the markets. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Next up is Amy, and Amy will talk about the the communications in the workplace, and also how to get people back into the workplace in a controlled way using the systems within the office environment. Yeah, so Josh, you're up in terms of closing the loop and making sure we cover all the aspects of bringing people safely back to work. Josh.
Okay, thank you, Peter. As a workplace consultant, we had several requests from our clients to help them in re-entering to the office buildings, because the employers have to provide a safe and healthy working environment. And as you're talking about fear and about trust, we try to develop a concept that can support organizations with the re-entry of the employees into the office buildings, and take away the fear Federico was talking about. Because in re-entry, it's important that you make the combination of the people, the working environment, but also the technology. And so by combining these three components, we developed the concept here that where we try to close the loop, that supports organizations with the planning, make reservations of workstations, ensure that the used workstations are clean, but also that we keep track of who was in the office and which workstations were used. So, Chris, if we go to the first slide, it's very important that organizations plan really good the re-entry of the office buildings. So they need to look into the organization. So which are the teams that want to come back to the office? They need to look into the physical working environment, which are the buildings or which are the workstations that can be used, taking into account social distancing. For example, from floors with 500 workstations, only 10% can be used if we have to take into account the social distancing. And also related to timing. Maybe we can restart re-entering the office building with 10% of the employees this week, and maybe into 2 weeks, an additional 10%. So we need to very good plan this in the concept. And then the employee can actually make use, Chris, by using the mobile app. Can if you go to the next slide, please. Yes, it can make a reservation of the, let's say, unlocked workstations. So the workstations that are safe in the working environment. So he or she can make a reservation based on his own agenda, based on the schedule of the team, connect to the team members. But at the same time, the employee will be informed of how he or she has to enter the building, and maybe the OTIS information can be included. And they also need to have guidance on how to move on the different office floors, so to avoid that people have direct contact. So after the reservation, people move into the office, Chris, and on the next slide, you can see that actually they have to confirm that you are on the desk by scanning a QR code, for example, or by acknowledging that you were there by using a piece of paper or a sign or whatever. And actually, at the end of the day, the cleaning company has the overview of the used workstation. So again, if you have 500 workstations, only 10% is used. It's a waste of money to clean all the workstations. So the cleaning team must be managed actually to go into the used workstations. And in the last step, we reassure that we have track of how the workstation is used. And so the health and safety officer can have an overview of who was in the office, which workstations were used, which workstations were cleaned, and he can make analyses over time actually to follow up and to improve how the offices were used. So it's very important if you re-enter into the working environment that it's done in a managed way, and that you can keep track of the different components, so that you plan, that you can make reservations of the workstations, that you can ensure that the workstations you use are cleaned, and finally that you can reassure and that you can track of the people that were in the office building.
If you when you plan the re-entry, and you have been doing this in Europe with your company, what have been some of the things that have been most difficult to manage from that re-entry perspective?
But today I think it's not about technology, so that's easy to use, and it's a little bit about workstations, because we're looking now into a short term. And so we need to maybe do some little changes in the working environment. But the third component, it's also what Federico was talking about. It's about the people. And I think that we are still underestimated, and maybe we don't know yet how groups of people, how teams will react on re-entering. At least a lot of our clients, they went through a very good experiment on telework and on home working. And a lot of people experience now that they can work from home and that they can do a lot of, let's say, team meetings over the web. And so they're asking now, why should I come to the office? If they reopen the office, but I can still work from home, why should I go to the office building? And so this is one of the main components now that we're discussing with our clients to have this clear and to see how this will evolve in the future and how this re-entry can support this, let's go back to normal.
There's a question coming in from Tom Sumo. He says, he asks, with most people that have had or have COVID-19 being asymptomatic, how can the screening process work, and what can you do to trace that?
But what we trace is who was in the office building, and we keep the data for a couple of weeks, depending on the policy of the company. So we keep track of who was in the office building, and it's HNS officer who decides on. We are not doctors, so we transfer it to the HNS officer, who has access to the data, and it's up to him to decide on this.
But do you do temperature checks, and how do you figure out if people have the disease and they are infectious? I think that's what Tom's question is about.
Sorry, maybe I get it wrong. So we don't do this. No, we don't do this. We just measure the occupation and support that people re-enter into the building. So we do not measure temperature. No, it's only if somebody who was in the office has becoming sick 2 or 3 days after he was in the office, we can go back and see who was at the same time in the office building.
Right.
That's the concept.
Which is also incredibly important that you are able to have that record and then be able to trace it. But you don't. Do you have any experience of doing temperature checks or monitoring people coming into the office, whether they would have symptoms or anything like that? Do you have that experience, Federico?
No, I don't. What we did with that perspective, what we did see is, especially in China, right? Although there was not because of course the number of people, in order to avoid social distancing, we have to limit the number of people that go into the elevators, they're using the elevators, right? So although in China there was not an official distance, they say it was around 6 feet, right? But that cannot be achieved in an elevator. And what we saw was self-regulation of 4 people, and then per elevator, and this lasted around 4 weeks, according to from the information we have from our team in China. And then then it went back to normal occupancy from 6 to 8 people. But what happened is that they were all wearing masks, and in some cases with rubber gloves. So people are going back to normality and in a period of 4 weeks. And we saw that in China, and also in countries like Hong Kong, in Asia, which are at an earlier stage. But not temperature check. We saw temperature checks in some locations, but in very few.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Amy, are you back online? Or Chris, do you have a status on Amy's whereabouts?
Yeah, I'm checking on that, Peter. I'm sent her an email to invite her in again. So if you want to take some more questions,
we have plenty of questions coming in. So just let me know when she is online, so we'll know. All right, let's take another question. This is from Gregory Alevras. How do you manage the risk of indirect contact related to touching surfaces or airflow pushing the virus around the environment? Any of you have and some experience with that they can share?
But I think there are some misunderstandings about the airflow. So at least in the regions we are working in, it's not, at least the information is that the airflow is not bringing into the virus into the office building, or at least the risk that this is the case is very low. So in organizations we're working in, so they reduce the air that it's recuperated from the outgoing air into the incoming air. So they reuse the entire airflow from the outside. You can do it during summer, but in winter you cannot do it. So and also there is miscommunication about you're not changing the air, you're just exchanging the heat. So it's the power that you're exchanging. So and also a lot of our clients, engineering companies we talk to, so they're not so that you need to adjust the airflow. The touching points is something different, and that's why you need to make a good agreement with the cleaning companies. So the companies that are using our tool, they have cleaning people. Most of them, they have cleaning people during the entire day. And so at noontime, they create a report from our tool, and they just go through the workstations that are used, and they clean the desk from the workstation. So it's a process, but again, we're still in a phase of improving a lot of things, and so we need to find out also with the cleaning companies which is the best and most efficient way to work. But related to cleaning of touching points, it's the cleaning company who needs to perform, and you need to redefine maybe the service level agreement you have with the cleaning companies, and to look in what are the KPIs that they're using and redefine them.
Federico, you have a comment?
Yeah, regarding the airflow and that you were mentioning, what we've been participating in some roundtables with architect HVAC companies lately, because we still have to have an understanding of what might be some code changes in terms of air circulation requirements within buildings, right? And maybe now we will have to go and move to the separate air circulations within buildings by floors or by lobby areas, right? And how can that impact the overall design of the building, right? And actually the code itself. So we are an early stage, but in the US we've already seen and we've participated in some working groups that are starting working on that direction, right? And also, again, how would that, because that could impact a lot of things from the design perspective. Also, how could that affect the building sway, right, or the stack effect, right? I'm talking about high-rise and very tall buildings. So it's still at an early stage, but certainly, I mean, certain requirements when they come from the code, that it could affect the overall design.
But to that point, we actually got a question from David Reynolds. Is the air exchange in the elevator cap a factor to control and monitor? Question mark. Is that something you would recommend that you do and look at the airflow in the elevator cap?
Well, the elevator caps, you know, you have per code, they have some ventilation, so, you know, and you have the hoseway there, you know, when the elevator, some distance between the landing doors, you know, and the floors and the elevator. So there's already a natural.
Could you speak up a little bit? You're a little bit low on the volume. Okay. Could you speak up?
So the elevators already by code, they have natural ventilation, right? And also there's, as you know, there's a separation between the car and the landing and the landing floor, right? And that space between the landing floor and the actual car entrance, you know, allows also ventilation through the hoseway. So what we also talked about earlier in possible solutions is about putting also those purification fans and purifying products, right, in the cab in order to make sure that you are cleaning the air that is circulating within the car.
Thank you. I have another question from Laurel Brooks. Are you pairing this, and I think she's referring to you, Josh, and your input. Are you pairing this with the clean desk policy, and do you recommend electric static cleaning programs?
We're pairing this to each type of concept that the client is using. But of course, in this situation, one of our clients, they have a dedicated desk policy. And during the crisis, the first thing, and the dedicated desk policy with a lot of documents on each desk. And in the past, we tried to move with them into a new concept with the clean desk policy, but it was very difficult for the employees. The first thing they did before re-entering was getting all the documents from all desks into boxes and clean the desks. So de facto, they are now in a clean desk policy, although people have assigned desks, but the desks are empty. And the feedback from the people that they always said, we need all these documents on my desk is away now. They say, okay, let's keep the documents in the boxes, maybe in cupboards or into the shredder, so that they can work more digital. So I think let's call this an experiment, is actually moving, I think, a lot of organizations into a clean desk policy, and also connected to the more people that will work remotely or will work from home, that you don't need that many desks at the same time in the office. And also with the other component of the new cleaning technologies, I think it's an opportunity now to move on with this and to implement this into offices. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
There was a question, and I can answer that on your behalf, Josh. You have to interrupt me if I'm doing something wrong. But there was a question about what system are you referring to, and I think that was from Maureen Shields. They said, what software is he using? Josh is representing Archibus, and Procos Group is a dealer of Archibus in Europe. And the purpose of having Amy on from IBM was also to get a perspective of IBM, of course, on the Tririga platform, just to get that balance. But in this case, Josh is representing an Archibus point of view, or systems. The principle you're working towards are, of course, general, but just with your reference.
Thank you for answering my question. Yeah.
I have to that point actually. From Sam Davidson, not everyone will have a CMMS system and the ability to use QR code technology. Manual systems will still have to be used in some places, especially for non-profit organizations such as Children International, which I suppose Sam is representing. How much of this stuff that you have been talking about, Josh, especially you, I suppose, is applicable for not using a CMMS system or an IWMF system?
But it's without becoming too technical. So the concept I presented, it's about the concept. It's about that you need to close the loop, and it's supported by technology. And you can use Excel sheets or you can use paper documents. But the application we have now, it started from 100 users. So it's a mobile app on the phone. It's disconnected from the network, from the organization, and setting up the system takes a couple of days. So it's inserting the drawings, inserting the HR list, and everything is in the cloud. So it's an easy to use and a fast and furious application. So I think it's open for a lot of organizations. If you have 10 workstations to manage, it makes no sense to do it with technology.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Peter, I think we've got Amy from IBM back.
Yeah, excellent. Amy, good to have you back on the call. Chris, will you switch to
Peter,
Amy's
can
slide?
you hear me?
I can, yes, absolutely. We're hearing you loud and clear.
Thank you. These are issues real time, right? Technology issues real time. Nothing ever goes perfectly. Learning that the hard way all the time. I have missed a lot, but I do want to focus on a few areas specifically before we run out of time. And one of the areas, there's three of them here: ensuring readiness across the facilities, organizing your spaces. And I know Josh has probably discussed a lot of these, and this is about the occupant safety. And then after you have that in place, monitoring how your employee counts and visitor counts are going across your entire portfolio. So Chris, next slide, please. What I want to talk about here is, as Federico mentioned, occupancy well-being and trust. That's the biggest thing, is about the trust that the employees are safe and they're feeling safe as they're coming back to the office. Ensuring the social distancing, how are you doing that? I believe Josh showed some slides on that. It's the same, we use IBM Tririga, so you're able to place people, not just every other workstation, but you have to also think about what's across from that workstation. Do you have tall panels? Do you have short panels? And thinking about how that works. So it might be every 2 workstations, depending on the layout. And then enabling reservation of those spaces. So it might be for just some of them, it might be for all of them. Allowing tools to help the employees to be able to reserve spaces, whether it's a workstation or whether it's a conference room, and then the workflow of how you want to clean that workspace. I think we talked a lot about that. Those processes can all be built in any tool, and in Tririga it's built in so that if you release a room early, like let's say you release a conference room early, it will generate a workflow to the team, the janitorial team, then to go and clean, because you only have a certain amount of time between each one before it can be reused again. So it releases that space and you can tell that it's been sanitized and it's open for the next person. And then of course you want to monitor the critical supplies that you have. The key is who's using your buildings and how. Monitoring is something that we opened up in January of this year, and we're working in conjunction with Cisco DNA Spaces. So the Cisco, the Wi-Fi is already in place, the infrastructure is already there. You're able to see the organizations and how they're coming back to the workplace. It's not enough just to see the badge data coming into a building, but where in the building are they going? You're able to track that, and it's scalable. So infrastructure is already there. I can't emphasize that enough. So you're able to see where people are going by department in a particular location. We know that we're probably going to come back in waves, not all at one time. So there could be extra surplus space out there as well as real estate. So it gives the real estate planning teams the opportunity to right size the space over a long term, even way beyond the post-COVID. It's going to have a reaction in how we are within the workspace and how many people are coming back into it. There was a Gartner report of CFOs. They were polled to see what their thoughts were about returning back to the office. 74% stated that not all people were going to return back to the office. They did not expect that at all, even long-term post-COVID. So that was an interesting statistic. So with the AI model and machine learning here, you're able to see the trends over time of the departments and how they are returning to the office, whether it's the next 2 months, 6 months, or a year. And that allows the planning teams in the CRE areas to make good decisions on how they want to move forward with their real estate portfolio. Next slide, please. So I know that I got in and heard about the air filters, so that's of course something that you want to think about, whether you're using a higher level quality and how you're going to put that together. We have like a facility management, you can put a project together so that you have all the tasks that are needed and you're able to then kick them off and make sure that they stay there, make sure the signage is there, and the processes are in place so you don't forget things, and so it moves quickly for all the team members back at the office. And then I just want to wrap up with the final slide. Something that became very apparent to us with working with Tririga is that it's beyond just the corporate real estate groups that are using, that need access to tools where it impacts the entire company in this way. It's really about business continuity planning and how you want to manage emergencies It's bringing in other personas besides corporate real estate, like employee health and safety. Who's the enterprise health and safety persona that would want to have access to this kind of data to see who's coming back into the office and how. It's like tracking the visitors as they come in and knowing that you have information about them, who was there and when, as well as the employees, is critical in case someone does come up with test positive with COVID. So I'll return it over to you again, Peter.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for this insight. It fits very well, of course, with the discussion we are having. I have a question that's a little bit along the side that Josh was also answering, but I'll pose it to you anyway. That's from Mate Andres from IFMA Spain. I see that we all present solutions for big companies that can have control, just investing in some technical solutions. However, there are many that probably cannot. Offices around 50 to 100 people that have no such option, but they still need to have their employees return safely to their premises. And the crisis will probably affect them harder. What should we recommend to those smaller offices in terms of occupancy, panels, technology, that type of thing? Amy, do you have a response to Mate?
Yes, I do. I think there are a lot of smaller technologies that are available. Certainly IFMA is a place to go to find out options for those. So you could reach out and find out for your area or your size of company what would be a best solution, and they can give you recommendations, as well as Gartner and Verdantix. Those are companies that specialize in larger groups, and they can say, you know, here are some of the teams, or here are some of the companies you can look at in your arena for your size.
Right, and there's another question for you, Amy, which probably may not lean to more towards your current role at IBM, but maybe a little bit to your background. Luckily, you are also having a background from the FM and corporate real estate industry. That's from Gregory Elevaras. How will COVID-19 impact the current and future design of workplaces? Will we see a return to more high wall panel system or even full height wall office environments? Do you feel comfortable responding to this, Amy, given your background?
Yes, so I was formerly a CFM, so that thinking about that, I think there's a lot we don't know, and I think the only way we're going to know is to see the trends. Who's coming back? Who feels comfortable coming back? And what are companies going to expect when you do come back? It's going to drive. This is a fundamental shift that's happening across the board, and we don't really know. Are companies going to invest in tall wall panels? Is that going to keep it at bay? I mean, people are going to go to conference rooms. They're going to be in the same areas. They're going to be in cafeterias, that sort of things. I can't imagine that would be where we would go, but we never know. It depends on the trends of who's coming back, when, and how. To me, that's my personal opinion.
Josh?
Yeah, can I add to that? Because so I told you that we're workplace consultants. So we're also talking with our clients and are doing workshops. So we have clients where we had the concept ready just before COVID came, and they wanted to implement the new working concept, saying no assigned desks. We have 70% of people who can work remotely, and so they're asking now, are we going to build this, or do we reduce the number of space? And I read sometimes in newspapers that people from corporate real estate say, so let's say the open plan office with neighborhoods is dead. Let's go back to the enclosed offices. So that means that the clients who's using now 8,000 square meter needs to go to 10 or to 12 or to 13,000 square meter, which they will definitely not do because they will go into larger investments. So the thing is on how organizations and how will people make use of the future working environment. And again, as I told before, we went through a tremendous experience experiment on how we can work remotely. And so this will create a new working environment, and not with adding plexiglass overall or adding additional walls. No, it's the working environment will become the meeting place, and I think this will be in a let's say in a safe and a healthy way. And I think there is a challenge. I think more or less the concept, I don't think that we need to wait for another year. I think that at least with the clients we talk to, they say, okay, don't change too much to the concept we have. Let's maybe rethink how we use it, and then we can move on in the future, so that we really can adapt what the people, the teams, and the organization needs. And I think there is the big challenge. And I think that it's not by adding additional elements into the working environment. It's by redefining what the people need.
And I mean, from my perspective at JLL, that's definitely also what we see, is that we don't foresee a situation where we're coming back into small closed offices or having these cubicles again. That's history. That's long gone. It's not going to help us in the current situation, and we don't really want to work in these environments. And to your point, the purpose of the office is changing. Now with the experiment on home working, which is probably the largest experiment in the world that we were forced into, there's probably no doubt that will change the workplace forever, and we will use that much more extensively in the future, and that will redefine the workplace, where it's going to be more like we talk about at JLL, a hub and club model, where people actually come to the workplace to be creative, to be collaborative, to be social with your colleagues, to have meetings with clients and peers and leaders and what have you, and that whole dynamic around the workplace is changing the way we work, and also is changing the design of the workplace. So Federico, definitely. I noticed you also have a comment to this.
It was more on the previous question to this that I didn't want to interrupt, but in terms of how can we help or support if the premises of the building is not as a very big building or facility, right? And what I would like to say is that the technologies we have, the solutions we have, for example, from the vertical transportation perspective for social, to enable social distancing, it can be applied. We have solutions both for more sophisticated systems with dispatching systems that would be, but we also have solutions that could be applied in two bottom traditional systems, which are might be installed in older buildings or with a less number, less density and less number of people, right, population. And for example, I was early, for social distancing, as I was explaining earlier, you can pre-program the elevator to stop in specific floors, without really having to, avoiding people to have to touch, the bottom to place a call, for example. And that technology is already available today. And for example, in some regions, what we call the Sabbath service, right? That we do it on Fridays for certain communities around the world since a long time ago. So I just wanted to clarify that there are solutions also available for that.
But here's another question for you, Federico, and that's from Carlos Rodriguez. Elevators, what is a good personal limit waiting for the elevator? Should 6 feet still be the number to use? What apps are available for touchless buttons? You already mentioned that. And how will this? How could you reserve time slots for the elevators? Is that possible?
Okay, let's go one by one. First one would be in terms of distancing, right? There's no specific. We haven't received, any specific information from code requirements, as I was mentioning earlier with the example from China, right? Like in China, they recommend a 6 feet distance, but then at the end of the day, that was very complicated, and it was self-regulated by each one of the building owners, and they said, okay, 4 people. And then that lasted for 4 weeks, and then people are starting to use 6 to 8, people within the elevator. But of course, ensuring that the people using that were using PPE equipment, right? Masks, and in some cases even rubber gloves. Second question, Peter, was?
That was the is there an app where you can book a cab for the elevator or something like that, where you can make it a little more bespoke?
Well, yeah. Well, we offer what we call the e-call, which is an app where you can place a call to the elevator, and then you avoid touching the.
Yeah, it was my story. It was my mistake here. Would there be certain time slots? Would that be a good idea? Understanding Carlos's question, would there be, to allow people to go up and down the building during certain time slots? Would that be a good way to manage the logistics and people flow?
That has to be studied on a case by case from each one of the buildings with the facility managers to understand the impact of the changes on the overall performance and waiting times. So that's
Amy, do you have anything?
Well, we have the software, we have the OTIS plan in order to do those analyses and support each building. Yeah.
Sure. Amy, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
I was agreeing that it depends on your office space, just like Federico was saying. Is that a 25-story building or is that a 2-story building?
Right.
There's elevators down.
Yeah, and nudging people. Actually, nudging that's not a question. Yeah. I have a question for you guys. I mean, how do you work with, the on-site communication, and especially nudging people to, if they're at the bottom floors, taking the staircase, or maybe coming in at different hours just to avoid that congestion around the lifts and around entry or exiting the building?
Yeah. But I think Amy? For sure okay.
Yeah, I think that the number of people that you have at a facility is what's important as well. If you don't have as many, it's not going to be quite the issue as if you had a full staff that was there. What teams need to be there, and the social distancing with it, and then with an app you can see if you're using the machine learning, it will pick up like the real time with showing on each floor, monitoring and saying there are 50 people on this floor. Oh, there's only 20 on this floor. That gives a person the idea, oh, I'd rather be on that floor of 20 as opposed to the floor of 50. And then once I get there, I don't want to go anyplace else. I think we will rethink about cafeterias and common spaces a little bit differently than we have in the past.
Yeah, and potential solutions also from the vertical transportation perspective would also depend on if the buildings are single tenant or multi-tenant, right? Because then the entrance times, the peaks could differ, right? And the entrance and exit times and etc. So and the adjustment of the overall vertical, transportation system or dispatching system it could be much more complex if we have a multi-tenant facility or facility with multi-tenant rather than just one tenant, when you can coordinate with one single company or one single tenant, those times, and you can escalate them, right? All
right, thanks. We'll take 2 more questions, and then I think we'll have to close it, getting to the top of the hour. Let me just, there's a question here from David Drummond. What is considered the new normal in managing visitors to the office, especially where some countries have different type of laws that can open up to all kinds of risks? Amy, I guess that goes to you. You've been touching on the risk question.
Yes, I think it's like, how often do you have to have an in-person meeting, knowing that that's first and foremost. Do you have to have a visitor, for example, or can you conduct the business via some kind of a webcam like we have today? That's the first question. Secondly, you can have them request access in advance, so it's a planned visitation, and the person knows, they can take surveys. Are they well? When they come to the office, they already know that they can have entry presented to them with a badge access. All that can be automated. It's coming into an office then, do you have PPE available to them? That type of thing, and going to a location where you are reserving space in advance with them, and then establishing once the space is released to have it cleaned. Those are kind of a high-level process. I know that PPE is really important. We had a Tririga Tuesday this week, and Sandy Corcoran from Ernst & Young was talking about their process, and the company sent out to over 350,000 employees a personal package of PPE to them. So that says volumes about how the company cares about them, and having that kind of safety in place is needed, especially if you're going to have visitors, because they might not already have that equipment. So I think preparing them as well is what's needed.
Thanks. Last question is from David Boylan. What are we learning from those who have already been monitoring re-entry, especially China? Federico, if you could reply to that.
If I understood, the question is why do we're not learning from those?
What are we learning from those who have already been monitoring re-entry, China, for example?
Well, I was at the beginning, what I was actually saying earlier, right? It's critical to build that trust and that confidence that people are going back to a safe place. And as I was saying earlier, right, messaging, using the communications channels that we have, within the building, and we coordinate together with the facility manager or building owner in order to communicate those messages well. And what we learn is that people, as they're coming into the buildings and they feel that they're safe and their health is protected, in 3 or 4 weeks, people start to feel more comfortable and start behaving differently, right? Going back to former behaviors. And that's the example I was giving initially. You were having during 3 or 4 weeks 4 people using the elevator, and 4 weeks after you see again elevator with 6 to 8 people in there, and people feeling completely comfortable in using them, right? With their protection. So I think the communication and building that, again, as I said earlier, building that faith and that strive to avoid fear is a critical learning.
All right. And thank you so much. Josh, you want to have a comment?
Small thing. It's not an experience from China, but what we learned from the clients that introduced our solution till now, we see that the number of people coming into the office are far below the people that are allowed to come to the office. So that people are still waiting. And I think what Federico is saying, it's about communication to the people and support them to get away the fear. And then they will come to the office when they need to go to the office.
Thank you, Josh. That's an excellent closing remark. Thanks for all the questions that we have received. Let me just go to the reminder slide here that we have the next webinar in our series next Wednesday at the same time as this one, and that will be a walkthrough of the first day returning to the workplace. And I think a lot of the questions that were addressed at this webinar will probably also be addressed or readdressed and have some other aspects to that next week. So it seems to be a highly relevant topic at the moment. Thank you so much to Amy, Josh, Federico, and Chris for setting this up and for participating in this and making your knowledge available. Thank you also from my side to all the participants.
If I can add, so I want to thank all the panelists for all the great insights. And also, I want to actually give a huge thank you to the audience. You guys made this an incredibly engaging session, had a lot of really thoughtful questions, so we really appreciate that. And just as a reminder to everybody, you're going to be able to get this full recording and the slide deck on ifma.org/coronavirus. You can also check that out in our GoToStage and YouTube channels to see all the past episodes. And as Peter mentioned, we will be back here next week for that walkthrough, the first day returning to the workplace. So please go to covid-19webinar.ifma.org to register for that one. Thank you so much to all the panelists, and thank you to the audience. See you next week.